Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Hey, welcome to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. Glad to have you with me. If you're looking for yesterday's podcast, there wasn't one for Tuesday morning, simply because on Monday I had business meetings that took all day long, and I didn't have an opportunity to get to the house and record one. But enough excuses about why there wasn't a podcast. But sometimes I get emails and people ask, hey, where's the podcast? I don't find it. Trust me, if there's not a podcast, it's either because A, I didn't do one, or there's been a delay for any number of reasons in getting the podcast uploaded. So everybody quit worrying about it. How about that? You've heard me laugh over decades about the old liberal saying, and for that matter, almost anybody said it doesn't have to be a liberal, talking about, if it just saves one life, we ought to do this. Well, my lawyer friend came into town the other day, and I picked him up at the airport. We drove into downtown Denver so we could go to dinner, and then I could drop him off at his hotel, conveniently just across the street. And I forget how it came up, but we were we're always comparing traffic. I don't know why we do this. I guess because we're old farts and we find it funny. But we're comparing traffic between Washington, D.C., where he spent considerable time, where I've spent considerable time, Oklahoma City, where I've spent some time. He spent more time than I have. And then, obviously, Denver. And on the way back from the airport, I don't know what was going on. It was Sunday evening. It was maybe 5:30 or so. Pena Boulevard was just completely backed up. Now, the drive into downtown wasn't too bad, but then once we got off on the 20th Street Viaduct, it was just, bumper to bumper, and nobody's moving, and it's driving us crazy, and we start griping about the traffic. And I casually mentioned to Andy this idea that Denver has about Vision Zero. And Vision Zero, if you've not heard about it, is the idea that in Denver we're going to, not we, they, because apparently government's going to do it, because you and I have nothing to do with it. It's all about spending taxpayer dollars to implement some sort of wild-ass vision that is never going to occur. But it makes people feel good, and so that's why we do it. And it's called Vision Zero. And I don't know when this goal is supposed to be reached, but the goal is to get to zero traffic deaths. So I'm explaining that to Andy, and of course he just chuckles and says, without missing a beat, he chuckles and says, well, that's easy enough, just ban cars. And we laugh about that because then he starts talking about, then everybody would be driving bicycles, and then you'd have bicycle accidents, and you'd have peds hitting bicycles and bicycles hitting peds, and pretty soon you'd have to have a new Vision Zero program because the pedestrians and the bicycles would start causing accidents. And, of course, I didn't say it, but I'm thinking to myself at the time, we'd also go back to horse and buggy, and we'd have those same problems. We'd have the horse and buggies that are driving too fast down the 17th Street in downtown Denver, and they would collide with a pedestrian, and my gosh, we'd have to have another Vision Zero plan. It's this kind of tomfoolery. Now, do I want traffic accidents to just continue to exponentially increase? No. And in fact, they haven't exponentially increased. I heard a news report the other day talking about there have been, and I don't remember, and I don't care. And it's not that I don't care about individuals who have died in traffic accidents. I don't care what the number is, because that's not the point I'm getting ready to make. Let's just say, and I don't know why this number sticks in my head, but it was close to 285, that there had been 285 accidents or deaths, car accidents, pedestrian accidents, whatever it might be, 285 deaths in Denver. But that wasn't the way it was reported. It was reported, and let's make the assumption that 285 is the correct number, that there have been 285 tragic deaths in Denver so far this year. And I remember thinking to myself, wait a minute. It's at the time, it's November 18. Well, actually, I think this was on Sunday, so it would have been November 17. It's November 17. There are 6 weeks left in the year. We've gone through 90% of the year. So when the news people make us think that, oh my gosh, there have been 285 traffic deaths so far this year, you think, oh my gosh, that number is going to double. It's going to triple because we're only in January. No, we're actually in November. The year is almost over with. But I thought it was a great example of how the news media takes a simple number, the number of people who have died in traffic accidents, and I think this was all of Colorado. I don't think it was just Denver. And then you make it sound much more dramatic than it is by claiming so far this year. Well, this year's almost over with. But going back to the idea that somehow we can reach vision zero, that we can get to zero accidents. Well, even if you reduced the speed limits everywhere to 10 miles an hour, some cars still going to hit some. In fact, you're probably going to have more accidents because people are going to fall asleep at the wheel trying to stay under 10 miles an hour whenever you're driving down the highway. Drives me nuts. It just absolutely drives me nuts. These stupid, unattainable, unrealistic goals that are only designed to make people feel better. Now, if you wanted to tell me that you have a master plan of some sort to try to significantly reduce traffic accident deaths, I might pay attention to that. But when you tell me that your goal is zero traffic accidents, I now mock it and make fun of it because that's unrealistic. That's like saying we're going to have a murder rate of zero in this country by the end of the year 2020. By the end of next year, we will have zero murders in this country. I don't think that's going to happen. Or zero cancer deaths, or whatever other malady you want to pick out. Well, long story short, as I'm thinking about that, I'm cleaning a stack of papers out, and I run across an old article. I haven't seen this article in ages. In fact, I can't even tell you how old this thing is. So I'm sure the numbers have changed somewhat. There's nowhere I've looked through the page. My guess is this is probably at least 5, 6, maybe even 7 years old. But the article raises the question, what if 1 million people did X? And the first fact is, if 1 million people drank a pint of wine, then one life would be lost due to cirrhosis of the liver. And here's the upshot of that. When you think about it, 1 million people drinking a pint of wine, government programs should be put in place in order to limit the scope of wine drinking such that only 999,999 of us have it within our power to consume another pint of wine in our lives. This is true because if such programs were put into place, then one life would be saved. We can refer to such a federal endeavor as the Ministry of Wine Consumption in order to make it sound acceptable or professional, and to make it sound, I would add this, so that the politicians can make it sound as if, yes, we're doing something, and it's going to save one life. Really? To save 999,999 of us, we're going to limit consumption of wine to only 1 pint. And that way only one person will die of cirrhosis of the liver. Nobody would argue that that's reasonable. Now, why would none of us argue that that's reasonable? Because some of us like to consume wine. Some people make bad choices, and they consume way too much wine, and so thousands of people die from cirrhosis of the liver because they turn into alcoholics. That's been going on for millennia. And it will continue to go on. What are we going to do? Prohibition again? Because we see how that was an abject failure. Then it has another interesting fact. And this goes back to the whole idea of Vision Zero. If 1 million people each travel 10 miles by bicycle, then only one life would be lost due to an accident. 1 million people each traveling 10 miles by bicycle, one person is going to lose their life. So going back to Andy's point, well, the solution is we just convert everybody to bicycles, but then you have bicycle on bicycle and bicycle on ped and ped on bicycle accidents. And sure enough, you're not going to get just one accident. You're not going to lose just one life. You're going to lose more than that. But here's the upshot. Government programs should be put into place in order to limit the scope of bike riding. This is true because if such programs were put into place, then one life would indeed be saved. We could refer to such a federal endeavor as the Ministry of Get Back in Your Cars Where It's Safer, you fools, though this doesn't really have the same ring to it as the Ministry of Wine, does it? And it doesn't alter the fact that bike riding is actually 30 times more dangerous per mile than is driving a car. How about this? Fact. If 1 million people live for 2 months in a brick or stone building, then one life would be lost due to cancer caused by the natural radioactivity in a brick or stone building. The upshot? A government program should be put into place to make it impossible for people to live in brick or stone buildings for more than 59 days in a row. Great unintended consequence? Great business for the moving company. Great business for the utility companies because now they can collect new deposits every time you make a move every 59 days. Now that's true because if such programs were put into place, then one life would indeed be saved. We could refer to that as the Ministry of Nationwide Relocation. And we'll just rotate people into buildings and then back out 6 or 7 times a year. Let's go to Miami. If 1 million people drank city water in Miami for a year, then one life would be lost because of cancer caused by chloroform. Now, people in Miami should not be allowed to drink water. We should just eliminate that. To be actually more precise, they should not be allowed to drink water from the municipal water supply for an entire year. And that's true because if this mitigated so-called water ban were put into place and then, of course, expensively enforced, we would nonetheless save one life. But the article goes on. It takes these things to its logical conclusion. And it actually asks questions, such as seatbelts for passengers in school buses. Have you ever thought about why don't we have seatbelts in school buses? The cost for each single year of life saved is $2.8 million. So the cost to save 80 years of life, the rough life expectancy of one of those rugrats on the bus, is $224 million per year. Who's going to pay for that? State of Colorado doesn't have that kind of money. School districts don't have that kind of money. So we do a trade-off. And what's the trade-off? Well, you've seen it. Some states have, these gigantic lights on top of the buses that flash as they drive down the highway. Of course, you have the flashing red lights and you have the stop sign that comes out, and you'll get a big-ass ticket if you pass a parked school bus that has the red lights flashing. So we have decided that rather than spend, and again, I don't know how old this article is, but rather than spend $224 million to save one life, instead of doing that, we're going to make just school bus travel safer. Strengthening buildings in earthquake-prone areas. To save one life by strengthening buildings in earthquake-prone areas, I'm not talking about new construction, I'm talking about existing facilities, the cost for every single year of life saved is $18 million. So the cost to save 80 years of life, again, the life expectancy, the rough life expectancy, the average life expectancy of one single person, that means we'd have to spend $1.44 billion. And of course, nobody's going to do that. How about, let's see, they have a whole bunch of these. How about federal aviation? This is a great one. The program's cost, because, air travel is so safe, the program cost for each single year of life saved by the FAA is approximately $23,000. I'd say that's pretty darn cheap. The program's cost to save 80 years of life, again, the life expectancy of one person, is about $1.8 million. I would say there, the risk analysis, the cost-benefit ratio is now getting to where we're saying when you think about the number of people that board airplanes every single day, oh yeah, to save one single life, $23,000, and we spend $1.8 million to save that 80 years of life, probably a pretty good expenditure. The whole point of this exercise is it simply shows that in many cases, it's unproductive for human beings to make the argument that we should do everything we can to save one life. Let's think about crime for a second. If we put every black male teenager in jail, we could obviously reduce the homicide rate, which is very high for that particular group, for that particular demographic. In 2010, the homicide rate for black male teens was 51.7 per 100,000. That's more than 22 times higher than the rate for white male teens, which back in 2010 was 2.4 per 100,000, almost 3 times higher than the next highest group, Hispanic males, at 17.9 per 100,000. So should we just implement a policy that says, you know what, in order to save those lives, we're just going to go ahead and put them all in jail? Now, I know that's an absurd argument. And it's absurd on its face because, obviously, in this country, we're not just going to jail people in order to save their lives. But again, think about the unintended consequences. How many people are murdered in prison every single year? I don't know what the number is, and I don't care what the number is, because I know at least one individual. Remember, this whole exercise is about if it just saves one life. We know that individuals are murdered in prison every single year, prison or jail, either one. So if we jail all black teenagers, one of them is going to die. So it's not going to save just one life. When you think about the judicial system, it's often said that it's better that 10 guilty people go free than one innocent person be executed. And just like the minimum wage, where everybody says it should be $15 an hour, when somebody says to me it's better that 10 guilty people go free than one innocent person be executed, I want to know, why 10? Why not 15? Why not just one? I get the symbolism, but it is a quantity. And the quantity suggests, I think, erroneously, that somehow justice is measurable, or it's measurable by that particular standard. Numbers vary all the time. Mortality statistics from the National Safety Council should make us, really wary of letting kids jump on furniture. Because in 2007, there were 118,000 accidental deaths from all exposures for a cost of $700 billion. So let's go back to Vision Zero. You and I know that driving our own car is more dangerous than probably riding public transportation, unless, of course, you're riding public transportation in certain areas of major cities where you run the risk of getting stabbed or knifed or whatever, but that I won't deal with that right now. You see, we estimate our own risks based on our feeling of competency at driving. And obviously, a lot of people are overconfident because we have people that die in car accidents. But at least you have some control. And that control is you get to choose when you leave, you get to choose where you go, how you get there, how often you stop, if you stop at all. And as I've often said, when it comes to public transportation, I don't have to worry about that symbolic last mile. I don't have to worry about getting from wherever the bus stop is to wherever my front door is, or wherever the light rail station is to wherever my place of business is. So the next time somebody says to you, hey, we ought to do this because it might save one life, like Vision Zero, remember those numbers. And then think about, is it even a realistic goal? We're going to reduce traffic accidents to zero? How? when you look at the Vision Zero propaganda they send out, it's all about additional bike lanes, additional pedestrian lanes, making pedestrian crosswalks safer, enforcing seatbelt laws, enforcing speed limits, doing all of these things. Well, here's the sad news for everybody. You can more strictly enforce and do all of those things, but as long as human beings are involved, somebody's going to die. Somebody's going to make a mistake. Somebody's going to make a bad choice, and somebody's going to die. So this whole mantra of, if it just saves one life, is not justification for public policy. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you tomorrow.